Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk to you about something which is very, very important in finance, and that is the relationship between risk, return, and prices. In my experience, this is something that is not fully understood by students. In fact, sometimes it is misunderstood by students, and I think that that is a tragedy because unless you understand the relationship between these three variables, you will have a hard time understanding some of the more advanced concepts in finance. And so the objective of this video is to help you understand the absolute basics about the relationship between risk, return, and prices. So here's an example. So let's suppose that you have a real estate agent and he comes to you and he says, hey, you know what? I found this house for you. If you buy this house today, so here is today, time period 0, here's today. If you buy this house today, in 1 year's time, I can guarantee you that you will be able to sell it for $800,000. Okay, this is guaranteed, guaranteed. The question is, how much would you be willing to pay for this house today? Would you pay $800,000? Would you pay more than $800,000? If you are like most people, the answer to those two questions is no. In fact, if you are like most people, you might say, you know what? I'd pay something like, I don't know, something like $750,000. And that's my question to you. Like, why? Why not $800,000? Well, because if you put $800,000 today in a house, even though you know that in 1 year's time you will get $800,000 back, it's guaranteed. You're not losing any money, but you may still want some compensation for the fact that during that 1 year's time, you could have done something else with that $800,000. In fact, it is possible that if you live in an environment where there's inflation, if you just get your $800,000 back in 1 year's time, the purchasing power of that $800,000 might be less than it was 1 year ago. So you might say, you know what? I need to be compensated just for the fact that there is going to be inflation. And so that's why I'm going to be paying a price of something like $750,000. Now, this is the first point that I want you to understand. The moment you say that I'm paying $750,000 so that I can get $800,000 in 1 year, that price automatically is saying something about the rate of return that you require on this investment. Specifically, you're saying, you know what, I want to make at least $50,000, which is the difference between these two numbers, on an investment of $750,000, which if you do the math gives you about 6.67% approximately. This is your required rate of return. And the first thing that I'm trying to help you understand is that the moment you say something about the price that you're willing to pay for an asset, that says something about the rate of return that you are requiring from that asset. Saying that you're willing to pay something like $750,000 for the house is like saying that you want a rate of return of 6.67%. Now, there are some of you who might have said, you know what, I'm willing to pay something like $770,000 for this house because I'm going to get a guaranteed $800,000 in 1 year, so I may be willing to pay $770,000. Well, in that case, you're saying that you are okay with making $30,000 on a $770,000 investment, in which case you're essentially saying that the rate of return that you require from this investment is approximately equal to 3.90%, approximately. Notice that as the price that you're willing to pay for an asset is going up, that essentially is implying that the rate of return that you're requiring from that is going down. And so this is generally the relationship, as you can expect, between price and the rate of return that you require. All else equal, if your required rate of return is going to go up, that is the same thing as saying, well, then I want to pay a lower price for the asset today so that I can get that required rate of return. So that's the first thing. There is an inverse, there's a negative relationship between prices and the rate of return that you require on an investment. Prices imply something about the rate of return that you require. That's the first thing. Now, let's suppose it's the exact same house, but now your real estate agent comes to you and he says, 1 year from now, there is a 50% chance that you will be able to sell it for $1 million. So not 800,000, $1 million. But there is also a 50% chance that, the market may not be that great and you will only be able to sell it for $600,000. Now, I have chosen these numbers strategically. On average, you would still make, $800,000. So I chose this strategically so that the average value that you're getting is still $800,000. My question to you is this. How much would you be willing to pay for the house today, knowing that when somebody told you that you can get a guaranteed $800,000 1 year from now, you were willing to pay something like $750,000 for it? My question to you is, would you be willing to pay $750,000 for it now? The average payoff is still $800,000. Would you now be willing to pay $750,000? If you are like most people, the answer to that question is no. Why? Because this $800,000 is not guaranteed anymore. There is risk. Look, in 1 year's time, only one of two things is going to happen. Either you'll be able to sell this house for $1 million, or you'll be able to sell this house for $600,000. But on average, if you were to do this exercise repeatedly, like buy and then sell and then buy and then sell, on average, you will make $800,000, but there is risk involved. Because you're exposed to risk, you'd say, I'm willing to pay something like, maybe $700,000 this time, right? And that's my point. The moment you're saying that, you're now saying that the rate of return that you require is basically $100,000 on a $700,000 investment. And, you can do the math, but basically your required rate of return has gone up. And why has it gone up? Because of the additional risk involved. In fact, if I were to change this situation further, where I said, there's a 50% chance that you'd be able to sell this house for $1.6 million, or economy could really, really tank, or maybe there's something about this house that its value can go down all the way to zero. Look, I still chose these numbers strategically so that, on average, if you do 0.5 times 1.6 plus 0.5 times 0, you still on average would make $800,000. But can you see there's a whole lot more risk? You're basically talking about investing in a house that could be worth either 1.6 million or worth nothing. How much would you be willing to pay for the house today? Now, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are like, man, I'd pay maybe even $500,000. The price has gone down considerably. Why? Because the rate of return that you now require from the same investment has now gone up significantly. Why? Because of the risk. And so this is the fundamental point that I'm trying to make here, is that the rate of return that we require has actually two components. The first is that we want something risk-free. We want something which is the risk-free return. Like, even if there is no risk involved in the asset, maybe because there is going to be inflation, maybe because we are foregoing consumption today to invest in an asset. Like, even if somebody gives us something risk-free, we say, we still want some risk-free return. In our example, this was something like 6.68%. And then if there is some risk involved in it, we want some compensation for bearing that risk. We want some extra return for bearing that risk. In the world of finance, we call it risk premium. We want a premium for the risk that we're bearing. Risk premium is basically additional return. Additional, and when I say additional, I mean over and above what we are getting risk-free. High risk translates into a high compensation that we want for that risk, which basically increases the rate of return that we require, So the technically correct thing to say is high risk, high required rate of return. We require a higher rate of return. And the higher is the rate of return we require, that essentially implies that the price that we are willing to pay is essentially going down. And so the relationship between return and risk is not this. You should say high risk, high required rate of return. And essentially, as risk goes up, your required rate of return goes up, which is just another way of saying that price is going down. If you found this video useful, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And feel free to ask any questions using the comment section. Happy learning.